main event of the Jaguar Simola Hillclimb is the King of the Hill, in which 80 seeded entries spend 2 days trying to set the fastest time up the infamous Simola Hill. One of the crowd pullers was the Nissan GTR R35, campaigned by Craig Zank.
This is a GTR R35, but it's a Nismo 001. So it was the first Nismo ever made as a GT3 car from the factory. First couple of runs were really scary, but once you get a feel for the track, we're having an absolute blast. It's really, really awesome.
Another fast machine was the ex-Barber Dodge Series Reynard, now used by the Fantasy Racing Training School and driven here by Mike Verrier.
These cars were initially raced in America. Jackie Schechter won the 1995 Barber Dodge Series with it, and the cars were brought in 10 years ago into South Africa.
Meanwhile, the RPM TV Alfa Romeo 4C was attracting a lot of attention. With only 15 cars in the country, the little coupe isn't often seen on our roads, let alone being campaigned in anger. And as predicted, its combination of impressive power-to-weight ratio and nimble handling made it an ideal hill climb entrance. It's day 2 of the Jaguar Simola Hillclimb, and we've had a fair amount of time to find out what this Alfa Romeo 4C is really like driving up the hill. And I have to say, it's pretty good, as it promises on paper, with a mass of just under 900 kilograms, a power output of 177 kilowatts, and as we found out, very nimble through some of those twists and turns. Time-wise, we're managing times below 50 seconds at this stage. Pretty happy about that. And considering my track record at this event last year, the happiest thing about this event so far is that the car is still pretty and in one piece. A best qualifying time of 48.3 seconds made it the quickest two-wheel drive in its class, just behind a gaggle of four-wheel drive Mitsubishi Lancer Evos and a modified Volkswagen Golf R. Up front, though, the fight for top honours was on. Last year's winner, Franco Scribante, was back in his Chevron B19, looking for a second win and a record time. But despite some blistering qualifying runs, his final time wasn't good enough. One of the front-runners was Sab Gualtieri, whose heavily modified BMW 335i kept many of the more fancy Nissans honest. However, the man on a mission this year was Des Goodside, who brought a 1600 horsepower Nissan GTR R35 to the Jaguar Simola Hillclimb with only one objective: to make the King of the Hill title his. And he did just that, setting a new record time of 40.148 seconds in the process. That's going to be a very difficult time to beat. Gualtieri's BMW was a surprise second, with Darren Goodman's taking the final podium spot. When we left Johannesburg 5 days ago, we knew a couple of things. We knew that we had an Alfa Romeo 4C at our disposal, which we would enter in the Jaguar Simola Hillclimb. What we didn't know is just how well this car would fare over a 1,200-kilometer journey. And once we got there, whether it in fact would be competitive against some pretty fast and spectacular cars. Well, we've managed to do just about all of it. We have driven the car all the way down to Knysna. It has been a fantastic road trip, and I have to say, despite these compact dimensions and a fairly stiff suspension and a carbon fiber chassis, it's been supremely comfortable, which was a big surprise. We've entered the Jaguar Simola Hillclimb, and we've done pretty well with a best time of 48.8 seconds, and that's been quicker than a lot of much more fancied and much more powerful cars. And now, as you can see, we're on our way back to Johannesburg. We have Maritzburg behind us. We have about 1,000 kilometers to go, but knowing what we know now, that journey is going to be an absolute pleasure. And the biggest problem here is going to be to have to give the Alfa Romeo back at the end of it all. With more than 2,000 kilometers of long-distance driving, the average fuel consumption came to just more than 8 liters per 100 kilometers, which translates into a range of almost 500 kilometers. Consumption on the race days was somewhat thirstier at 15 liters per 100 kilometers, but then that's pretty good for full throttle driving. Most impressive of all, the Alfa shone as brightly on the road as it did up the hill, confirming that the 4C is a real thoroughbred sports car. With 177 kilowatt powering a sub 900 kilogram curb mass, the Alfa Romeo 4C has a giant killing power to weight ratio, but against all expectations it's also comfortable enough for long distance road trips. A tiny boot means luggage needs to be kept compact while the cabin is too noisy for normal conversation, but then it does sound spectacular. All the more's the pity that 4C production remains limited.